are, how many people die in their sleep from sleep apnea? And why can't you just buy the machine over the counter? Oh, okay. That's a good question. You know, the I mean, how many people die from sleep apnea? You know, we don't really know that absolute number, of course. And most of the time, believe it or not, you don't die from the sleep apnea event. Like if you think about it, when you're having sleep apnea, you you're not getting the air through, but your brain recognizes that, right? So you're just the same way you can't hold your breath while you're awake, right? If you try to do that, you'll pass out, but then you start breathing, right? The same thing will happen when you're asleep. If you're not getting air in, your brain wakes up, and when your brain wakes up, you take the breath. So your body's pretty good at correcting that. The issue is the repetitiveness of that collapse of the airway and that constant disruption during sleep that gradually leads to the problem of sleep of mortality with sleep apnea. And we know that untreated sleep apnea truly increases the mortality of people. I mean, if you have sleep apnea, you don't treat it, you die earlier. I mean, it's just these studies I've probably read 4 or 5 large epidemiological studies that show that. Now, they're epidemiological, meaning that they're not necessarily they're associated. So, but not necessarily causal, meaning that we see this phenomenon, but we haven't done studies to really declare, is it the sleep apnea that causes early death or other things associated with the sleep apnea? You try to account for everything doing regression analysis, but you really can't. So we have to do more studies to look at the mortality associated with sleep apnea. One of the things that I didn't mention during that heart sleep apnea in the heart, but it can also induce an arrhythmia of the heart. A specific one is atrial fibrillation, where the heart kind of it's very irregular. The atrial the way it beats. So that's another big risk. And so the issue again isn't the event itself; it's the constant nature and that constant repetitiveness of the apnea that's bad for your body. And the reason why you can't just buy the machine over the counter is because it needs to be set at a certain pressure. And believe it or not, everyone thinks like CPAPs, like we prescribe the different types of masks and the hoses and the tubes. The doctor really prescribes the amount of pressure of air. And that amount of pressure of air sometimes has to be adjusted. And if it's too high, it can actually induce something called central sleep apnea. So we talked about obstructive sleep apnea where the throat snores and then collapses. There's another type called central sleep apnea where the throat stays open, but your brain just doesn't take a breath. And, and that can last sometimes for prolonged periods. That can be associated with the low oxygen level. And it can actually be induced by too high of a CPAP pressure. So it's something that's, prescribed right now by doctors. But I will tell you, and I'm a firm believer of this, I think in time, you'll be able to buy a CPAP over the counter. And the reason why I say that is because there are more than 1 billion people in the world with obstructive sleep apnea, and the vast majority remain undiagnosed. We at Ognomy, that's a big mission of ours. We're trying to tackle this disease to stomp out the downstream heart disease effects and all those other things. But it's probably coming down the pike because of just the sheer number of patients that need treatment. But addressing the earlier question, like what's the best way to treat it? Like CPAP might not be the best treatment for you as an individual, and that's why you need to speak to a sleep medicine professional, preferably someone board certified in their field, so that they can give you the best advice and you can come to some shared decision making on what would be the best treatment for you. But really great question there. Yes, I am.